This Xbox Series S that has the broken HDMI port, I paid $100 for, and right now as of November 29, 2022 when I'm filming this video, they're going for about $200 used on eBay. I always get comments on these videos about how I pay too much for stuff, so if it only needs an HDMI port, I got a great deal and can make some good money on it. And this one I just found laying around my repair shop, and I have no idea where it came from or how much I paid for it, but it has no power, so let's get into it and see if we can figure out why. I've already tested this Xbox Series S and I know that it has no power. I don't know why though, so I'm gonna get this apart and see exactly what's causing it. Now, I've only fixed one of these a long time ago, so I don't know what I'm getting into here. Once I get this apart, I can do a little bit of testing and hopefully it's something that is fixable and I can find parts for. And I can already see what I think is the issue, but it might not be the only issue. Let me get the power supply out and then we can get a better look. And right down here we have some liquid damage. I'm gonna get this the rest of the way apart and let's look at this under the microscope. This is the area that we were just looking at on the overhead camera. Looking closer up, you can see all of the corrosion and liquid damage we have in here. The good news is that it looks like it's isolated to this area. I did take off this top metal plate and just inspect this area right here, and I don't see any liquid damage anywhere under the metal plate. So the APU looks good. I mean, you know, minus the old crusty thermal paste. We'll fix that in a minute. And then I just noticed looking over on this edge, we've got a little more liquid damage over here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is clean this all off. And then once that's done, we can start doing some testing and see if we can figure out what shorted and what is good. And now with all these components cleaned off, we can start testing and removing and soldering in new components when we need them. So let's bring out Scotty and see what he says. So this point right here comes basically straight from the power supply and is a positive voltage pin. And this plane right over here is a ground plane. So let's touch the two together and see how much resistance we get. 1 ohm, which is basically a dead short. So now I've got to start removing some of those components that were damaged by the liquid, and then we can hopefully figure out where this short is originating. So my bet is we have a problem either on this guy, or this guy. Also, these two capacitors, and these two capacitors could all be problems as well. I'm just going to start by removing this one and see if the short is gone. I'll be using a hot air soldering station to remove each of these MOSFETs. The gel you see me put on is called flux, and that just helps the solder flow. Now, after I removed these two capacitors, you saw that the short was gone. So let's start by checking this one, see if this capacitor is bad. Let's flip it over till we get the bright side. Okay, no issues there. Let's try this one. Oh, and there we go. So that's definitely one of the problems. It is possible some other stuff is shorted, but that capacitor is definitely the first problem. Where'd that come from? Capacitors all over this place. So I decided I would just replace these two capacitors and these two capacitors. So I just measured them and I took capacitors off of a donor board. So now we'll get those replaced on here. Then I'll get this MOSFET reinstalled. Then we'll test it and see if we have any more shorts. Now with all that work done, let's see if we still have a short. And we do not. So now let's get it put back together and see if we fix this one. But first, of course, we need to apply the perfect amount of thermal paste. There we go. Now we can get it back together and test it. Okay, and here we go. Does it power on? We got a light, good. Fan spin. Oh, fan spin, but do we have a picture on the screen? Come on. There we go. So Xbox Series S #1 is all fixed. We fixed this one for a couple cents. Let's see if we can fix Xbox One S #2 that has the HDMI issue. Yes. So this is the problem right here. Unfortunately, there's no way to rebend these pins in a way that will make this work again. This HDMI port has been totally destroyed by someone jamming a cable in. So we need to take it all the way apart down to the board, remove this port, and install a brand new good port. Now we have it torn down to the board. This is the port we need to remove. It is attached by some mounting pins on either side, and also a bunch of little tiny pins on the motherboard that connect to circuit traces on the board. We need to make sure that the solder is super hot and comes right off without detaching these little traces from the board. That is fixable, but it makes the job so much more difficult. My hot air station is going to be set to 900 degrees, and once that solder is melted, the port will just fall out the bottom. Now that we have this port installed and each of these pins is lined up with the pins on the board, it actually feels like these are soldered on here pretty well. But even though that's true, I'm going to go through and solder each pin on by hand just to make sure each one is soldered down as good as it can be. I'll also be adding some fresh solder to the pins just to make sure that we have a nice strong connection. Once again, I'll be adding some flux, and that will just help the solder flow. Now you notice while I was soldering this on that there were several pins that bridged together with a solder bridge, and sometimes you have to come in with a piece of solder wick or a solder sucker to pull that out. But another way you can do it is put on a lot of flux and then bring in another larger, hotter iron, and sometimes you can get the iron itself to kind of pull that solder right off of those pins. That's what I did in this case, and as you can see, it worked really well. Okay, and you can't get much better soldering joints than that, so now this board is ready to go back into the console. Then we can start it up and see if it works. Before we put this all back together, we need to apply the perfect amount of thermal paste, and now it's ready to go back together. Okay, here we go. We got a power button light. We have a fan. Let's see if we get a signal. Come on. Oh, black screen. And there we go. So this Xbox Series S is also now fixed. Yes. We could probably make about $100 by selling this on eBay since the part itself cost about $5. If you like this video, you'll probably like the video where I bought the first broken Xbox Series S on eBay. I'll put a link to that up on your screen now so you can come hang out with me over there and see if I can fix that one. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have a good one.